Hello everyone, I'm Aaron from DataStax, and today I'm going to take you through migrating an enterprise Java application from Spring Data to the DataStax Table API. This way, if you have an older application that's still working great, but you want to use some of the new features from the Data API, well, the Table API lets you do that, and you don't even have to worry about upgrading your existing CQL tables. Let me show you how to make that happen. So for the videos in this series, we're going to focus on a workshop that we used to do a few years ago. It was a workshop that was called Build Your Own E-commerce Platform. And the idea is that we built this like working e-commerce site. And, if you remember, every workshop we focused on adding a new subsystem. So, I think the very first one we focused on like the product subsystem, and then we talked about how to build, I think it was how to build a shopping cart next, and then how to have like a working user profile and single sign-on. And then we did an ordering system, and then I think eventually I added the feature product system as well. And I also did one with vector search, although I don't know if we actually made that into a workshop, but that is out there too. Anyway, the one that we're going to look at today is the featured product subsystem. So if I jump over to the actual website here, you can see that it's these products that load down here are the featured products. And I can like go click into them, like the Apache Cassandra 3.0 contributor t-shirt here. And, I can see it come up. I can pick my size. I can add to cart if I want to. But if I go back, it's these featured products that we're pulling out of AsterDB that, we might gain some benefits by converting this subsystem over to use the Table API instead of Spring Data Cassandra. So let's take a look at that. All right. I can go ahead and stop that. So if you're familiar with, Java Spring Boot and Spring Data Cassandra, that's actually what we used to go ahead and build this website with on top of AsterDB originally. And as you know, Java Spring Boot works on this premise of the MVC pattern, so Model View Controller. And really all of the magic happens right here in this this featured REST controller. So we have our repository, we go ahead and we initialize that. We have actually some get mappings here that help expose our methods so that, they can be called by just a simple curl request or from Postman or something, but also from the website front end as well, which the website front end for this is written in AngularJS. So I'm going to look at this one here. So find featured from feature ID. So if we go ahead and have a look at AsterDB here, you can see that this is the featured product group table that's inside of our e-commerce key space. And if I go ahead and just do a select from that, we can say select star from featured product groups. And you see that we get 4 rows back, and that's one for, oh, right, because I stopped the site. And that's one for each of those featured products that you saw on the site. We have these stored by feature. Of course, we have these stored by something called feature ID. And in this case, it's just the date and the month. And the idea is maybe an e-marketer wants to do some promotion on their retail site just for a specific month. So this one was 2021 12, so that would be December of 2021. So what happens here is that when we query this partition, because that's what this is partitioned by, is that feature ID, it comes back in sorted order by category ID, because category ID is our clustering key. As you all remember from, how to build Cassandra CQL tables. So the idea is that by querying for this feature ID right here, we're going to get these 4 rows back and use that to build our featured product. Anyway, with the table API, we can do some really cool things about how we pull that data back and how we show it on the front end. So let's get to that. One thing you'll notice too, at the bottom here, we have this method called mapFeatured. And that basically takes a featured entity as it's returned from Spring Data and maps it into a featured class, which has a lot of the same properties. But if you've used Spring Data Cassandra, you know that the entity classes for Spring Data Cassandra, let you do things like specify, table names and column names and keys and things like that. And this mapper basically just brings it back to the the normal featured class. So we'll probably need something like this for our new featured table entity class that I'm going to show you how to build in just a minute here. But if we have a look at the regular featured entity class like this, you can see kind of what I'm talking about with the like the table annotation here. Then we can specify a primary key. This is actually a composite primary key on the featured product group table. So we actually do have a special Spring Data Cassandra class dedicated just to building that primary key, and then mentioning that that feature ID is the partition key, category ID is your clustering key, have your getters and setters, and so on and so forth. And then, the rest of that featured entity class is really just the, the payload columns, specifying their column names and types, and then their getters and setters as well. We're going to need 2 new classes here. One called Featured Table Entity, and the other called Featured Table API DAL, or Data Access Layer. So let's start with the featured table entity. So basically, when we have this featured entity, we have to build something like this, but for the table API. And the reason is that this is going to make our mapping and serialization process a whole lot easier in terms of bringing the results in via the table API and actually serializing them into, Java, into plain old Java objects. So the first thing I'm going to do inside this entity class is let's go ahead and name this as entity table. And yep, this is going to be featured product groups. Copilot got that right. So let me import that. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paste in all of my my class properties there. I will need to bring in that UUID type. And now a couple of things here. First of all, if you remember from our table definition, featured ID is our partition key and category ID is our clustering key. And those two class properties or columns together make up a composite primary key that we're going to be using. So the first thing I need to do is specify and let the table API know what our primary key definition is. And I'm going to do that by, partition by 0. Now, notice it takes 0 as the ordinal position of the column inside of the key, and position 0 is held by featured ID. So that's all we need to do there. We're also going to need to specify the column name because featured ID is going to be a little different. Yep, and Copilot kind of knew that it's featured _ ID. And then I really just need to get that pop-up to come in. There we go. And we can pull in column from the DataStax Astra driver. Note, don't pull in column from the Spring framework because it's not the same annotation type. Okay, so we got that. Okay, next, category ID. Well, Copilot kind of knows that we need to rename that, and it is correct. Next, let's do a partition sort by. I think it's just partition sort. Yep. And we're going to say position is 1. That's right. And then order equals sort ascending. That should be the correct enum type there. I've done this before, so Copilot should know. So let's bring in partition sort, and let's bring in sort ordering. or sort order for that ascending enum. There we go. Okay, so we have that all set. All right. Let's see. So let's go. Yep, column name equals name. You know, since name, the class property, isn't any different from name, the column in the table, we probably don't need a column annotation. But just for consistency, I'm going to make sure that they get them. And then parent ID. Yep, parent underscore ID. Perfect. Okay, so I have all my class properties. I have my table API annotations on. Really, the only other thing I need is my assessor methods, or getters and setters. A lot of IDEs will have a way of doing this automatically with Java, and Eclipse also does. So I'm going to do a source, generate getters and setters. I'll say select all because I want all of them, and we'll say generate. All right, so now I have all my getter and setter assessor methods, and this class is done. Next, let's have a look at the featured table API DAL. For starters, this class is going to require a few constants, and I'm going to want to make sure I'm grabbing the AstraDB app token from the environment, the DB API endpoint from the environment, and the AstraDB key space from the environment as well. Fortunately, with the pre-existing project, we already have the token and the key space defined. So with the existing project that we used to run with all of the other properties that were required to connect to Astra, we can reuse those two here. So that's really cool. API endpoint, though, is new for the data API and thus the table API. So we're going to need to go ahead and make sure we define that in the environment as well. I already have, so I'm going to skip that step. But if you need to get your API endpoint value, you can really easily do that if I go into Astra, and right here on my VectorDB database details is this API endpoint, and I have a little button that lets me copy it and store it off. So I highly recommend doing that. Okay, so we have our constants there. We're going to need a local constant, private, we're going to say table, and this is going to be of type the featured table entity table that we just created over here. Table is a new type that comes with the data API, and specifically when you want to use the table API, this is the way to go. So we're going to pull this in. Now there's a few different options here, but you definitely want to pull this in from the Astra client library. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to be a little more descriptive here. We'll say featured product table, just like that. All right. So our data access layer is going to need a constructor. And we're going to, oh yeah, we actually do want to have the word public there. So first things first, we need to initialize oh, look at that. Copilot's really on top of things here. Just like with, when you're using the data API, you do want to connect and build a, you know, like a data API client and database object. So I'll just hit tab here. This is mostly correct, but you know, as those of you who have used Copilot know, a lot of times it's good at suggesting things, and that's where that ends. And let's go ahead and bring in database from the client. We're also going to want to specify key space there. And then for the data API, yep, we're going to do a DB API get table. We don't need key space there. We do, however, need the table name, and we need the featured table entity class. That way, it knows how to do that automatic mapping from whatever we pull back from the table API into this featured table entity class that we just created. All right, that really should do it for our constructor. Okay, so next we need a method to go ahead and pull back that that featured product list. So I'm going to say list, and we'll say featured table entity, and we'll say get featured products by ID. And here's where we're going to say int feature ID. Hey, there we go, Copilot. You got something right. Good job. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in the list type. All right. And we are going to break this up a little bit here. Yeah, Copilot didn't quite get that the way that I wanted it. So let's say list featured table entity. We're going to say return val. Then it'll say equals new array list. There we go. Now let's bring in array list as a type. Okay, good. And we're going to want to return val like that. Okay, and then in between here, table cursor, and this is going to come back as a featured table entity map. So really, I'm going to need another one here of featured table entity. And I'm going to say these are results. That's going to be featured. Well, Copilot, again, you're close, but no cigar. Product table dot find. And I'm going to say filters dot equals, and we're going to say feature ID as our column that we want to find in. And then we're going to pass the feature ID like that. So let's go ahead and move this around a little bit, make it a little easier to read. Let me bring in the table cursor. Oh, featured ID. That's it. Yep, I totally missed that. Okay, so this is going to build our result set here. And then really what we're going to do is we're just going to say, actually, yeah, Copilot got it right this time. We're just going to iterate through each feature table entity that comes back in the results, and then we're going to add that to the return val list. Just like that. Now, if we go back to our REST controller here, yeah, so this is the method that gets exposed, this find featured from feature ID. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment that out. And instead, we're going to say, oh, yeah, look at that. Copilot got it right. Good job, Copilot. All right, so it's going to my featured table API DAL, and it's getting featured products by ID, and we're passing that feature ID that it gets from the REST request, and it's building this list of featured table entity, and we're making sure it's not empty, and then we're returning it with a mapper. But our mapper of map featured, if you remember, expects this featured entity type, not the featured table entity that we had just created. So really, the easiest way around this is, if I just go into here and say featured table entity, then this all resolves, except of course that we didn't have to build out a structure for the primary key. So let me just get rid of that and get rid of that. Oh, and we want f dot. There we go, and f dot. And that's featured ID. Oh, actually, that's wrong. Yeah, I thought something didn't look quite right with that. There we go. So then we have to update our getter and our setter. Okay. Kind of working backwards here a little bit. If we go back to the REST controller, oh, right, I should change the names as well. There we go, just to be consistent. Now if I go here, okay, now everything works. All right. So now that we've changed the mapper, everything lines up here. So with that, let's go ahead and give this a try. Go down and I'll say run as. I'll pick my run configuration of sample e-commerce. You can see all the environment variables we have, tokens and things are kind of cut off. This is where I put in the new DB API endpoint. So yeah, let's go ahead and give this a shot. All right, if I scroll over, yep, we've started on port 8080. Application's running. So let's go back to here. Oh, and look at that. Everything comes up. So, hey, we actually have this working with the table API right now. Now, of course, you might ask, well, how is this any different from what we had before? I mean, what advantages did we just gain? Well, maybe we want to show these featured products in a different order. The table API is going to give us some quick tools to allow us to do that. So let's go ahead and stop this for a second, and I can go into my featured table API data access layer. And down in this method here, I'm going to, create some space here, and let's say sort, and that's going to be a new sort. And let's say that we want to sort on product name. And then I want to say sort order ascending. So let's go ahead and pull in that sort library. There we go. And we'll do sort from DataStax Astra client core query. And we also want to pull in sort order. There we go. Oh, and I'm missing some things in the constructor. If I, oh, yep. It's looking for a data API vector and like a vector column name. And since I'm not doing a vector search right now, I'll just go ahead and say null, and that should be okay. All right. Now I need to attach this sort that I've just defined to a new structure called table find options. And I'll say, yep, options, new table find options, set sort. Okay, and let's pull in that library real quick. Oh, and this is actually just sort, not set sort. There we go. Okay, and then the only other change that I need to make here is right here after the filter. I'm just going to pass our table options like that. Okay, let's go ahead and give this a shot. All right, that looks like it's running. We go back here. Oh, okay, we have our featured products. And if you'll notice, they are in a different order by product name. So Apache Cassandra 3.0 contributor t-shirt is first. DataStax Astra 1 team long sleeve is second. Then the DataStax black hoodie, and then the DataStax gray track jacket. So really, we've just influenced the sort order. And one thing that we could do is we could do this by really any column here. So if I stop this, and if I wanted to, I could say, hey, let's do this. Let's do this by price, and we'll say descending like that. And then we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, so now that we've rebuilt with that, we should be able to go back here, and boom, these are now sorted by price. So yeah, this is working, and the great idea about this is it gives us some abilities to sort and, you know, kind of rethink our result sets in ways that really weren't possible with you know, regular CQL tables. And the table API lets us do that. Okay, real quick, here are some links you should check out. Specifically, this is a link to our documentation. So docs.datastacks.com, EN for English, astra-db-serverless /API-reference. And then underneath that, you can go to Data API Client HTML. That takes you right to the docs for the new Data API. And then within the Data API, we also have the Table API to get you more descriptive, you know, references as to how to use some of these structures that I've just showed you today. So you can go to table-methods /create-table HTML, and this will put you right in the middle of the Table API docs if you want to learn some more about this. And of course, the code for today can be found in my GitHub repository of, you know, just github.com, AAR0NP, and this is the workshop_ecommerce_prototype. And specifically, we're working in the Table API tree or branch that, you know, changes this and lets us use the Table API to get a lot of that data. All right, thank you, everyone. I hope you learned something cool about the new Table API and how to utilize it. We're going to have a few other videos on converting additional subsystems on this enterprise site here that I'm hoping will help you out as well. So hey, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Want more information on modernizing your self-managed Cassandra deployments? Head on out to datastacks.com/modernize-apache-cassandra-workloads, and you'll find all the information you need on keeping your self-managed Cassandra cluster updated and in top running form. Thank you, and have a great day.